Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second February event, this time featuring my great friend and amazing materials writer, Mrs. Kirsten Wachter. I'm not sure if my German is as good as her Greek, but now she's going to amaze you by speaking in Greek. And here you are. The floor is yours, Kirsten.
Okay, so Yassas Kaisas Epharisto por me kalesate. This is as far as my Greek goes. So according to my translation app, it says something like, hello and thanks for having me, and thanks for joining us on a Sunday. You are seeing my screen, I hope. You're seeing all the slides? Okay, good. So thanks for the warm words, Maria. Maria is, of course, a wonderful and amazing person and very good at organizing and getting people to do things. What we are going to talk about is making materials that matter. As Maria Ray said, I'm a teacher of a lot of hats and I design materials, but I'm not somebody who's been trained to be a teacher with special needs or who's been trained as a diversity teacher. So all of what I'm sharing with you today is actually something that comes from teaching practice, from my classrooms, what I observed in my classrooms, and there will be a lot of takeaways. Before you ask, I will send the slides to Maria in a special print, and then you can actually get the slides and use the activities that I'm talking about and some of the ideas and some of the resources. And so you don't have to take screenshots. You will get the slides at the end of the session. And we start with a story. So I had English as a foreign language at school, and my English book featured an English boy, Bob, and his dog and his family, and the pictures look pretty much like this. So this isn't from the book, but this is basically what they looked like. And at that time, I was 12 years old, short hair, just like today, glasses at that time. Now it's contact lenses and everything. I didn't really feel represented, neither in my EFL material nor in any other material. The only person that represented me was on television in Annie Blyton's adaptation of The Famous Five. As you can guess, I was George, the girl that you see on the right, right? So, and diversity wasn't really a topic. There weren't any Black or diverse people in my English book. Black people and Native American people came when we did American English for 1 year, which is something you have to do in German schools. It's very weird. And they were very often connected to poverty, crime, problems, slavery, and everything. So the only gay person around was Oscar Wilde, and he wasn't really represented as being gay. He was just represented as this really witty author. And my first question to you, so please use the chat box, is where were you? So if you look at your English as a foreign language material you used at school, did you find that you were represented? Or was it this kind of perfect white English world that you were supposed to aspire to? Put your ideas in the chat box, please. Are you represented in your teaching materials? Okay, Katarina says not really. Yeah, I never felt, okay, Maria, I never felt excluded, but the children in Britain were richer than me, had less homework. And so there was this kind of perfect world we wanted to strive to. We get back to that. We get back to that later on. Okay, good. So, of course, we have different ideas about diversity. This is also something I'm going to address. But basically, I think our classrooms have been diverse for quite a while now in different ways. And what for me is quite important is that when I started taking more care of diversity, my classrooms became quieter because we didn't have this problem of people who didn't feel represented, who didn't feel seen or heard in the classroom, who were therefore constantly fighting for attention, that somehow stopped to a certain extent. So it was actually quite interesting. So we have to think about privilege. We have to think about power. Yeah, so Britain being placed as a place or presented as a place of privilege, and we have to think about stress levels in the classroom. And if I start acknowledging my students in different ways, my learners in different ways, this can actually help. So of course, English books have moved on from when I was a kid. So here you see an example of a book that came out in the 1990s, Handshake. I don't know if anybody uses this or used this in the past. And you can see already groups get more diverse. On the right, you see this group of foreign students who learn English. On the left, you see this group of people working together. Wonderful early example of mansplaining. Uh, so sometimes it really had to do with content, and we try to just present a different society. And sometimes I had the feeling they just choose diversity, ethnic diversity in that case, as a kind of token, so that they felt actually that they were doing the right job. Now, English as a global language, and Maria already said that I'm with IETFL B6, so business English and international workplace English, because this is what I prepare my university students for, is very important and at the heart of my teaching. So English as a global language is, of course, the perfect vehicle, because by nature you would be teaching diverse things. So it's something about representing race, ethnicity, gender, women at work, different cultures, and so on. And this is not only in business English books. Of course, I did homework for this. So I did a bit of research on Greek school teaching materials, and I found two examples. One example is way up. Does anybody work with this, or do you know this? Just put a yes or hands up in the classroom. So this is by Rivas Publishing. I think could also be the other one. And so by Grievous Publishing, and you can see already here that from a very early age, what they are trying to do is they're trying to give children an idea of you will communicate in English to a lot of different people. Different ethnicities from different countries. What's quite interesting is not all of them, like the girls on the left, are from France and Spain, will be native English speakers. So you see English is presented as a world language, and they start presenting at least ethnic and gender diversity, and they try to modernize it a bit. I haven't really seen other forms of diversity. I haven't seen anybody in a wheelchair or something like this, but it's getting somewhere. However, I found the three characters in the book quite stereotypical and very much looking like Abby. So again, this kind of like, we want to look like the white privileged British kids. So that was a bit difficult, but I'm sure, and you can see there's really an effort to diversify things. So I divided my talk, and there will be activities and opportunities for questions all the way through into these parts. So we start first about who should be represented and why is it important. Then we talk about different ways of representation. So images, visual materials, storytelling, layered storytelling, usualization, so not presenting diversity as a problem. I care for you. So what we should do when we are faced with certain issues in the classroom, and then I'll wrap up. So, and there will be examples, and I will invite you to ask questions all the way through. So we start with Who's Zooming Whom? Great pop song by Aretha Franklin and George Michael. So who also, if I remember correctly, had Greek ancestors. And the first question that I have for you, so again, please use the chat box, is what does your classroom look like? I teach in Germany, and in Germany, we have seen, no matter which field of English teaching you're in, that we have social inequality for different backgrounds. People who are from working class, low income backgrounds, or from migration backgrounds or something do not have the same chances in the German school system, full stop. So this is not nice. This was different when I was at school. I'm a working class kid, but this is the situation today. We have a growing cultural and ethnical diversity in Germany, but we also have, because we do no longer have these special schools for people with learning disabilities or something. Yeah, we want to have the inclusive classroom. So you have a growing number of learners with special needs in your classroom. Um, so, and we have, of course, a curricula that requires inclusion of certain topics, like talking about sexual minorities. And a lot of teachers do not find that really that easy to do that, especially with a group of adolescent teenagers, as you can imagine. And of course, the problem is there is a lack of resources. There isn't really teaching material available because teaching material is often 5 to 10 years old and hasn't been updated, and the schools don't have money to introduce new teaching materials. There's a lack of expertise because teachers receive very little to no training on how to deal with all these huge numbers of diversities in the classroom, and there is a lack of staff. We do not automatically, just because you have people with ADHD or with dyslexia in the classroom, you don't get a social worker or psychologist to support you. So the teachers have an incredible amount of extra work. Is that something that's okay? I can already see people putting something in the classroom, in the chat. Is that something that you're experiencing in Greece as well? Is that quite similar? You can also unmute yourself. I think that's actually quite okay.
Yeah,
So,
everybody can unmute themselves.
mhm,
In Greece, the situation is pretty much as I described it in the chat. What you mentioned about the support of specialists in public schools, and Effie is here, she's the expert in public schools. She can correct me if I'm wrong. The situation is getting better. There are support classes and there are specialists. They are more in evidence than they used to be. How well they work and if their work brings results, that's perhaps up to the specific case. But mostly classrooms tend to be unified. So we pay lip service when we talk about inclusivity. The
mhm.
true inclusivity, like having a student who is cross-gender, or a student who looks like a boy or would look like a boy but dresses like a girl, these cases are left, I would say, they are left unattended in most cases.
Yeah, so echoes pretty much the experience that I described. Yeah, so okay, good, thanks. So, um, so in this part, I'd like to briefly address these three questions. First of all, why is representation important? And then we have who needs to be represented, and how can we establish representation of diversity? So, there has been a lot of research on this topic. So why is representation important? Well, we know that the material we use at schools, like textbooks, do shape students' social views. Even if they very often hate the book, it leaves an impact because they're dealing with this a number of times a day or a week. And if we have stereotypes in the book and they're presented as like, this is typically British, this is typically Greek, and so on, it does actually also do something to our students because we represent maybe a certain kind of powerful or privileged group. And if I'm not a part of it, my interest rate will actually drop. That if students feel underrepresented, and I have to say our neighbor country, the Netherlands, have done a lot of research, but there's also some really valid Greek research, and there's a reference page at the end of this. People do feel underrepresented, and that leads to poor academic performance. They just don't care. I'm not a part of this group. I'm not welcome in this group. So why should I bother? And a lot of classroom problems often stem from this in my experience. So it also leads beyond school. So people who feel that they don't belong rather have depression, suicidal tendencies, and all of that. And know that as early as people are like about 5 or 6 years old, when their cognitive skills develop, they start recognizing stereotypes. And by the time they're 11 or 12, so when adolescence slowly starts, stereotypes become reinforced. And this is very important when identities are shaped. And if identities are based on stereotypes, or your identity with your in-group or your out-group are based on stereotypes, you get huge issues, and it really shapes the way that you develop. And this is why it's actually more to diversity and representation than we often think about. So again, I want you to use the chat and put some ideas into the chat. What do you expect from representation? So I've given you a bit of the background why it's important from a psychological or sociological way, but what do you think? What advantages do you get when you try for more representation in the classroom? Put your ideas in the chat, please. So if you can't use the chat, you can also unmute yourself and say something. Don't leave it all to Maria. Maria is very active in the chat, of course. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, students to feel part of the class, to know their own voice, language, heritage, religion, respect. Yeah. Growing up, I was often laughed at because of my name, and that hurt. Yeah. So I
Right
think,
now, everybody thinks that we were always in awe and admired weird first names. But while I was
yeah.
growing up in the 1980s, late 70s, early 80s, being called Araxi and having an Armenian surname, it was like I was the odd man out. I was the odd
Mm-hmm.
woman out. And it
Mm-hmm.
was a weird name. And, people just wanted an opportunity. So it doesn't help the bonding of the group if
Yeah.
this happens.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, inclusivity has to do with citizenship, and citizenship in the 21st century is all about acceptance, tolerance, and
Mm-hmm.
understanding that we need to respect religion, not just our religion.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Maria.
Thank
Good.
you.
So Katarina also puts into the chat. I have to read this out because the chat isn't recorded. So what we get from representation is a stronger sense of belonging, higher academic engagement, broader perspectives. Yes, you get actually a wider worldview. Reduction of stereotype and bias, improved classroom discussions. Thank you. And Nicoletta says, in your experience, teenagers nowadays are very interested in discussing LGBTQ plus. Thank you for getting the letters in the right order. I always mix them up. Topics, and I've had students come out exactly once they felt safe enough to do so. Yeah, and good observation. While EFL materials have made efforts to include different nationalities and people with disabilities, I've rarely seen any representation related to gender identity or sexual orientation. Nicoletta, we have something for you right at the end of the presentation. Don't worry. Thank you very much for your contributions. Excellent. So, but yes, so the idea is, and this is why I put this quote here from Evison. This is what we want. We want recognition, appreciation, feeling accepted and safe, because then I can calm down if I feel that I belong. And as I said, we don't fight for attention. So, but it's also important for us because we do something to our learners. We show their worlds. We say, yeah, your world exists too. We want to know about it. We want to learn about it. So we open a window and we make their stories a part of our society. Because we have this huge archive of storytelling. This actually means we allow for integration, which works from both sides, but we also boost confidence among our learners. And usually, so this is what I see with for example, with my Syrian refugee students at university. who really do a very, very good job at learning German quickly and English quickly because they really want to finish their studies. And they're so motivated. And then we really talk about, so what was it like to leave your home country? And they say, you're the first person to ask this. I say, yeah, but it's important because I have to know how you're feeling so I can do things about this in the classroom if possible. And sometimes it's a really nice thing and it helps. So who should be represented? Well, we have visible diversity and we have invisible diversity. And I put religion, ethnicity in the middle because we have a lot, like what Maria said about Armenia. We have a lot of ethnic diversity that isn't visible, but it's there. Invisible diversity would be sexual orientation. Some people think it is visible. I definitely disagree. Neurodiversity, mental abilities, visible could be race, gender, even though that's also arguable, age, body shapes, and physical abilities. And this is also something which is actually quite interesting. Now, we have the saying in English to cut a favor, yeah? So just to do something, it's a bit like lip service. And of course, we shouldn't do that. We should offer real food. And the typical line these days is, okay, we have a rainbow flag, yeah, for the LGBTQ community. We show some people of color. We make sure that we use gendered language, and that's enough. No, this is a token diversity. This is not true diversity. So it's a bit like social washing. So you have to represent what really suits your classroom, what's there, what's not there. And you have to think about, if you're familiar with it, there is the EU Diversity Act, and that includes also disabilities, body shapes, and so on. So you know that very often the laughing stock of the class is the person who's either super skinny or who's overweight. And that's also a form of diversity, that we have to establish a classroom where they feel okay as well. I don't think we have to show all kinds of diversity constantly and at the same time, so don't bend over backwards, but we have to find solutions for our classroom that really make sense and make space for all kinds of people. So how do we do that in the ELT classroom? And this is possibly what you're here for. So first of all, visualization. I actually use a lot of characters in my material, multi-layered, diverse characters, so everybody can find some aspect of the character they can actually refer to. I try to make people visible. I give a voice to people. I think that's what Maria also mentioned. Giving voice is very important. So we have to tell layered stories that people are not reduced to one aspect of their identity, but actually see their own multiple identities. And we have to recognize our learners. So we start with the visual part. So we start with show me. The first thing is, and that's who of you creates their own materials? Because when I looked up Greek school books or textbooks for English lessons at school, it didn't really seem like that there are big publishers. A lot of this is done by the Ministry of Education. And it doesn't seem to be like in Germany, you have basically 5, 6 standard books, and depending on where you live in Germany, you have to use this book. So who of you works with textbooks and who of you creates their own materials? So can just put own or textbook or to be or something in the chats, because that would be really interesting for me to know. Both? Okay. Okay, use books, but you supplement them with your own material. Okay. Nicoletta, also both? Okay. So I actually, before I design material, I really think about a master plan for my characters. Thank you, Christina, also both. Okay, so what you see here on the left is like the more or less the landing page where I introduce my 5 characters. So this is one of my latest book projects. It's a book about teaching English for football. And there was only one book, and this book was written for little boys who wanted to play in the English Premier League. I said, that's not really a good idea. Football is so much more diverse than that. So we have a Japanese player who's playing in Germany, because that's actually what happens. We have a young African student who wants to play in the Premier League and go to a football academy in England. We have a Brazilian female scout. That would be interesting. So somebody who actually is a talent scout, and we have a Scottish manager, and we have a blogger from Eastern Europe, so from Serbia, and she's also a woman. So I really try to create these characters as layered characters so that they have different parts, they share the love for football and so on. And we talk, of course, here about a visual representation. So even if you're not this African student, you go like, oh, but that's a lot of people from different parts of the world, and that's really what football is about. So you can identify with something. And this is also something that you can actually adapt quite quickly. So with the images that are available, you just create different profiles for your learners. You can do that with ChatGPT and say, give me 5 different profiles, put in some words to describe the characters. Why do these people need English? Why do they want to learn English? What's their background? What's their motivation? And then you can basically ask your learners, so who do you identify with? Do you have the same motivation as the talent scout or as the manager? Why do you need English? And what questions would you ask these people? Well, so this is also something where you can, with very little preparation time, create a kind of diversity layer that your students can refer to or relate to. And you can find characters, for example, in the app that I'm using right now in Microsoft PowerPoint. So meet Fu, Christiana, Alfredo, Kasha, and so on. So what PowerPoint does, what Microsoft does, is they offer character sets. And you can see there's a huge diversity in terms of body shape, ethnicity, ability, age, and everything. So you find people that you can just use and put them into your own materials. So I use this guy, for example, as one of my managers in my business English material. Why shouldn't a manager be in a wheelchair? I also used her as a younger junior manager or something like this. So you find them quite easily under stock images. They're called cutout people. And then as you can see here, you have this, you can click on one name and then you get people in very different situations. And as long as you use them in a non-profit way, you're actually okay with using them from Microsoft PowerPoint. So that's a quite easy way to use diverse characters in your own teaching material. So if you don't like working with PowerPoint or you don't have PowerPoint, there's also an app for that you can use. It's called Pixton. And Pixton allows you to create cartoon characters of different skin color, different age, different jobs and everything. So you can basically do that on the link, help. So like pixton.com, how to add a character to your comic. But even if you don't do a comic, you can get these characters and you can ask your learners to create a character for them. So that they can use that also as a kind of avatar or something like this. So this is also a very nice thing to do. When you select images for your materials, because most of us want to have images and materials, we all know we have to pay attention to copyright and everything, but it's also a good idea to pay attention to, again, diversity. One of my colleagues actually said the biggest risk in using images is to use them for illustration purposes only. So you really have to make sure that they support the ideas of your material, that they support general atmosphere. So here you can see some background pictures that we used to illustrate the book. And you can see that I also made sure I used a female referee. Why do I do that? Well, a referee is a person of power. So if you put a female referee there, you show women in football in a person of power. We did the same with football supporters. We did the same with player profiles, for example, so that we always made sure it wasn't just the white boys in the Premier League. So, and you have a number of websites, and you can also integrate these websites into PowerPoint, for example, like Pexel, free images. Usually the teachers I know are a lot better than me at those Creative Commons images or free databases. So, and this takes us to our next activity. You got any idea who you can see here? On the left and on the right.
I know these images.
So who do we see here? Well, on the left, we see the heroes of 2004, if I'm not much mistaken. It could also be 2000. So this is the Greek European team, Greek national team that won the Euros in 2004 under German coach Otto Rehhagel. So,
the
so the
4th of
Germans
July,
all,
2004.
yeah. So the Germans all supported Greece, of course. And this is the current Greek national team. And on the Greek national team, you have people whose parents come from the Cape Verde Islands, whose parents come from former Yugoslavia, and so on and so on. So it is actually quite a diverse team. And of course, now the typical activity for teachers would be what? Where do these people come from? Yeah, so write a profile of your favorite player, do some research, where his family comes from, or something like this. So that's the typical question. But you could actually do this differently. Instead of asking where they're from, change it to where do our players play? Do you have any idea where Greek players play these days? What do you think?
I'm sure I do not know, but it would be an interesting project.
So most of these guys here, a couple of them play in Greece, but most of these guys play in England in the Premier League, in the German Bundesliga, of course, abroad. Exactly, Tanya. Very good. They play in Italy. They play in Spain. So again, tracing them and their career, what is it like to live in a different country? What obstacles did they have? And some of them have a career of more than one country. So if you change it to where do our players play, you again open the world. So because you show people it's okay to move to different worlds, to different countries to play there. So you get this a research task to your learners. Greece still has the chance to qualify for the World Cup, for example, in the summer, and then you make them present this in class. So of course they can also say this is where my parents or the parents of my player come from, but it's more important to find out where do they actually play, where do they live, and what it is like to live there. So this is a quite nice activity, and that takes us, of course, straight into storytelling. So, and of course, we can tell diversities through a number of stories. And I had to find a picture that was free to use. Does anybody know who this guy is or supposed to be? So this is Hephaestion, the ancient Macedonian nobleman who was a general in Alexander the Great's army and also like the life partner of Alexander the Great. So, and he, of course, is a good vehicle to tell stories. Greek history stories, hero stories, and so on. And there have been quite a lot of adaptations of him and Alexander. So, and we have a number of stories we can talk about. So they're everyday stories, the stories that your students experience every day. They're hero stories, success stories, constructed stories, which you write for the classroom, but they should be close to experienced stories that your students can then share. They're stories that involve your learners, but your learners can also go and think about stories of the future. So where do they see themselves in 5 years? What do they want to be different in their lives and everything? So storytelling is a wonderful tool. And even at low levels of English, short sentences and simple vocabulary, people can tell stories. So storytelling, diverse storytelling can of course be supported by material you find online. We go back to football. Andreas Tete, one of the Greek national players, is actually somebody who speaks out a lot as a hero about racism, and he's now the Greek Player Union's anti-racism ambassador. So, and you find an article on the website of the FIFPro, which is the Professional Football Players Union, and you find this interview, and you can use that easily in the classroom. If it's too difficult, get ChatGPT to give you like a simplified version of the text or something like this, but it is actually there, and there's a lot of material like this. But, and this is again something I'd like to point out, diversity is not only showing people of color. Diversity is also the 60-year-old teacher. How many older people do we actually see in textbooks, school textbooks? Not really a lot. It's also the 9-year-old boy who won the reading prize. Yeah. So these are experience stories, and they also show diversity. Yeah? So we have to think about voices and faces of the people who have not really been part of the mainstream representation in the classroom. So if we identify one or two special groups, what happens is often a kind of domino effect that others feel included as well. And I always think we should really show real lives. So I construct my characters, but my characters are based on real people, including the 5 that you've just seen. So I think we need to move away from the old norm to a new normal. And what I think Nicoletta said about that her teenagers like to discuss LGBTQ items, I think that's a great step forward that also shows that people are curious about things if they're given a space to talk about them. And here we find another example from Greek teaching books. This is Think Teen. And the first 2 lessons are all about like meet the world. Yes, you can see this joint in our differences, different but alike, people and places, you and me, the way we look, and so on. So they use again the English language to also promote cultural diversity. I think it's a bit stereotypical saying somebody who has slanted eyes must live in Asia. He could also live in the UK or even in Greece, but at least they're trying. And I think it's something that you can use to basically prepare learners and get them then to discuss things, because you get them the vocabulary and you get them quite a good mindset. And so this is also something that I found and I like very much. However, we have the problem that in a lot of textbooks, children are reduced to one part of their lives. And this is what Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, a great Nigerian author, calls the danger of the single story. So she says that people usually see her as Black. And when she's seen as Black, she's seen as nothing but Black. So it's not totally wrong because she is Black. So that it is a part of her identity, but it leaves out a lot of her other identities and facets, which are quite important. So, and this is what she sees as one of the biggest risks. And this is what we mean when we talk about layered stories. So we are never only one attribute. I'm not just German and a woman. I'm a lot of things. You're not just Greek teachers of English. You're a lot of things too. We're never only one attribute or one role. So we are a lot of different facets. And this is also a part when you think about characters, not just to say, oh, so he lives in London or he's Black or something. And if you think about Way Up, the profile cards that they had, it was a lot about different parts of people's identity. And this is also true diversity, because we make people round, full people and don't reduce them to only one aspect. A great example of material you can use instantly is voices. Are you familiar with the series? So Voices is a textbook series for different levels, mostly for young learners of English. And they also, like, it's National Geographic who publishes this, and they also provide material on the internet. And what you see here is this website, LGBT Friendly Travel. So if you want to do this in the classroom, this is actually where you go. And you have the 2024 Travelers of the Year. And you find a number of stories you can do in the classroom with your learners, and it's prepared for classroom teaching. And in this Travelers of the Year, you see here the different characters, and the travelers include these multifaceted, multi-layered characters. So you have this person here is an artist, environmentalist, and a drag queen. You have somebody who's an athlete, an influencer, and a disability access advocate, and so on. Yeah? So by dealing with these full characters, you can also explore different parts of diversity, and they appear to me to be more usual, more common than people think. So again, this is a 5-minute preparation activity. Go to the website, look at these characters, and get your learners to ask questions to these people. To think about interviews. What could you ask them? What could their story be like? And so on. So, and that is basically where we move on to the next part. So I just quote this about the danger of the single story. Now I leave you with that quote. And I would say that my roles are your roles. So here you see some of my roles. They're not all. I think it's about half of them. But that's already a lot of private and professional roles that I'm taking and that are interacting with each other. And I'm sure that in all of these roles, you find 1 or 2 roles that you actually share. Could be the English teacher, could also be the daughter, the wife, or the writer. And that's actually quite important. So this is then where I ask my learners often. So I tell them my roles, I show them these pictures to write story postcards, so they prepare this at home so they can take pictures of their roles, yeah, that show them in different situations with different people and then present these roles. And it's quite amazing what then people find out they have in common with other people they never thought about. And this is also a great way to include more diversity in the classroom. So that takes us then to the next one, I'm not a problem. And here, and this is again, and the second resource for the people who want to teach LGBTQ issues in the classroom. A colleague of mine, Peter J. Fulliger, he has his own website. So this is the link, does a lot of preparation of material for these situations. So the original question that you found in a textbook from the 1990s or 2000s was, is it easier for a gay person to live in a village or a city? And he replaced it with straight. And then you see how absurd the whole question is. He went like, yeah, but that is how very often in the past diversity used to be represented. So gay people had problems in a small place. Yeah? So for them, it was easier. And this kind of problem angle is, of course, problematic in itself. So we need to usualize people to show them as normal, in inverted commas, because it always depends on how you define normal. And this is also something that's actually quite important. So if we show them as a part of the problem, like the Black people in my school book, then of course we just reinforce stereotypes. And I did a bit of homework on this, but correct me if I'm wrong. We have teachers in Greece who reported that there is a really alarming rate of homophobic incidents in classrooms. Yeah, so we had like 43% of their gay, let's just call them gay students, between 15 and 17, said that they would rather hide their sexual identity at school because they're really afraid of homophobic violence and mental health issues. So, and that's quite a lot. And I'm glad if your students have a different experience or want to discuss these things. And of course, the problem isn't the gay and lesbian people or the cross-gender people, it's the homophobic people. But this is why I have to address this. I have to address this in a way that, of course, everybody feels included. A lot of homophobic people do not really hate gay or lesbian people. It's just they know so little about them. They're afraid of whatever. And another thing about usualizing is, of course, success stories. So here comes my next question to you. Does anybody know who that woman is? Okay, I'll give you the name. This is Alexandra Stamatopoulou. And you can see she's swimming. She's a swimmer. And she's a Paralympic medal winner of France in Paris last year or 2 years ago at the Olympics. And Paralympic, of course, means there must be some kind of disability Any idea what you think her disability is?
We cannot see one of the arms. Is it the
Yeah,
arm?
could be the arm or the
The
legs or something
leg?
like this. Yeah. So of course she's shown here quite provocatively. So this is an article. You get the link in a minute on Greek Reporter. She's shown as a cover girl, and she suffers from a neurological disorder which is called stiff person syndrome. So people have really difficulty to move. Doing swimming is not the easiest thing, but she isn't just a Paralympic. She isn't just somebody who suffers from this syndrome. She also works as a speech therapist, for example. So again, you could use a case study like this, ask your students to research other case studies, ask your learners to prepare, for example, interview questions for the person and so on. Because if I encounter people like this, if I learn about people, then my mind opens up and diversity is no longer a problem. Or you can actually let them speak. You can see if they have a blog, if they are on social media or something like this, and what they say about themselves. What she said, for example, about her participation in the Summer Paralympics. So this is the link to the article, and actually she won bronze. So this is maybe less typical hero story, but it is also a hero success story that can promote diversity in the classroom very easily. And you find lots of examples in English in your classroom. So, and that takes me to the almost last part. I care for you. And as I said, I work mostly with grown-ups and sometimes with adolescents. But in Germany, when you're diagnosed with this dyslexia, you get support until you hit the age of 14, and then dyslexia disappears. You no longer suffer from dyslexia. Great. And my grown-up students or older students come to me, and I take one look at their writing and went like, oh, you're dyslexic, right? And they look at me like, how do you know? I can see this from the way you write in English, because it's very different from the way you write in German, and you can see those patterns earlier. And then I went like, oh, you're the first person to recognize this and say, okay, we have to talk about this. So at university, I can do certain things. At work, you can use certain things to avoid the writing problems and everything. But just the moment that we sat down and talked about this, they felt so relieved because they went like, I don't have to cover the fact that I have trouble reading and writing in English and in German. Huh? So they stop faking and their performance improves. And that's the really interesting thing. So what can I do? For example, people who have dyslexia or who have ADHD. So with ADHD, of course, you need to do more prep work. So why are we reading this text? Organize the text in shorter units. Allow learners to engage or act out the text. You can use focus mode when you work with Microsoft Word, so they can actually do special reading, or they can have the text read out to them if they use headphones, so immersive reader. If you give them a text in Word, and you have this, for example, alternative text. Yeah. So if people can't see a picture or something like this, then they can actually get the alternative text generated. So Microsoft Office now has a lot of special features where you can go to make things more inclusive if people have neurodivergent things. The most important thing, of course, is to show that you care. So with my dyslexic students, I now use different fonts that are easier for them to read. And I allow them I just tell them, dictate your homework to Microsoft. And then you don't have to worry about spelling. Just remember, you also have to dictate the full stop and the comma, and you have to speak clearly. But then they can write their homework because they don't have to sit there like, is it this through? Is it that through? Yeah. So, and that also makes life a lot easier. So, um, and that brings me to the end of my presentation. And I'd like to close with another great saying: diversity is no bandwagon. This is what, in my mind, seems to be a general tendency at the moment, because every company says, oh, we are diverse, or have a diversity policy. The politicians tell you that. But if you talk to people who are still marginalized and ignored in the classroom, the story is quite different. So if you want to give people who are diverging from the norm the feeling of belonging, you don't have to show all divergent people. But it's a pass pro toto system. So you show a part and you say, so look, we're open to all. Well, we need to give our learners, our diverse learners, a voice in English, and we have to think about what makes sense and what is feasible. And if I see that diversity is appreciated, I feel more welcome, and then I might open up and tell my story. So we need a balance of stories. And Adichie actually said earlier in her TED talk that she wasn't so much against these British kids. She loved reading up about them, and she had this idea of, this is perfect English. Yeah, this is the perfect English world. This white children having tea with their mum and going to this British school and everything. But only once she started reading authors from Nigeria who wrote about Nigerian people, she found out what she was missing. So that her world was no longer reduced to this perfect, idyllic English textbook world, but a lot of other people used English, and that part of, or that these people were also part of the English-speaking world, and that made her a better writer, because she said, I could write about people like me. I didn't have to write about people that I invented. So that's the balance of stories. And again, leave no child or grown-up learner behind. I think it's important to include all learners, even the boys with a loud mouth, or the girls who want to be a ballerina, something like this. Build common ground. Allow your learners to build common ground and to find out what they share. Treat each learner as an individual, which is a huge challenge in German classrooms, because teachers have 30 students in their classroom. And I would say that's one of the biggest challenges, because it's really difficult to see the individual, especially if people are quieter, and try to reinforce this feeling of unity and togetherness in the classroom, and be aware of tokenism, because that's not true diversity. So these are my references. I'm not going to stop on the references because that's a boring thing, but there are some really interesting articles about this topic that you might also find helpful. So that's basically from me, and I'm happy to answer questions or discuss things with you.
Thank
If
you
you
so
like.
much. How much food for thought you have given us. I really like the point that you made about tokenistic attitude to inclusivity, because it is a buzzword these days. And we should aim for actual inclusivity, not for what looks like inclusivity or looks good on the school website.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, as you said, there's a lot of lip service, and teachers are very left alone, and there isn't really a concept that helps everybody at the school. And I think it doesn't matter which country you go to. Some countries are better than others, but even in Sweden, you have so much racism and bullies in the classroom and everything. So it's still a big issue.
Indeed, unfortunately, bullying is on the rise, and I cannot understand where this is coming from.
It comes from fear. Bullyism always comes from fear, and it comes also from feeling that you're losing privilege and power. But a lot of bullies are bullied themselves, very often at home. And it's a way of fighting for attention and cementing your power place in the classroom. It's the same like being the class clown. And that's a huge issue, of course. And of course, you have to step up and you have to say this is not tolerable, but you also have to find a way that they learn how to drop that behavior, that they feel, oh, this behavior isn't necessary. It's all about power games. And why do you play power games? Because you feel you're not powerful. So, and it's difficult. It's really difficult. And this is still the thing where I struggle, because basically all I want to do is just like send the bully from the classroom, but you're not allowed to do that. So, yeah. Okay,
Interesting
questions, comments
ideas.
from your
Yeah.
idea, from your
Comments,
everybody.
ideas, anyone?
So
As Kirsten is finishing, please give me the opportunity to remind you that unless you actually take a look at the form that I put in the chat, I also put it on Facebook when I posted the customary photo that we post when the webinar starts. Unless you start taking some interest in the event of the next month, there won't be an event because you are the speakers. So we're going to get together in March, share ideas, a tiny mini activity you have worked with. How does it work? Who are your target users for this? Is it diverse? Can it be used at different CFR levels? What are the challenges? What works well with it? Why do you like it? 5 minutes, short and sweet. Send your applications. Everybody is welcome. Friends are welcome, as you know, and we all have a voice. I mean, this is what we call inclusivity. Indeed, I mean, the barriers between who does the training. This is what I learned from IATEFL, to be honest. Before I joined IATEFL, I was used to seeing the speakers as these iconic features. You could see them. They were figures that could be seen across different rooms of the convention center. They were the ones in the suits and they looked like speakers. When I started going to IATEFL, I noticed that the girl in jeans who was sitting next to me and we did the pair work activity before was the next speaker. Yes, I do mean for the 8th of March. And it's going to be, let's say, an opportunity for us to see what we can do from within. So send your applications. We don't have to be like 2 hours. It could be 1 hour. It could be 45 minutes. Time is not of essence. What is of essence is that we actually give back to our association. And we give back to Kirsten as well. I will give you a little heart. Let me put hearts all around me. Thank you so much for this. Thank you for, I have seen this presentation. Thank you for making it become Greek. And thank you for taking so much interest in the Greek educational system and checking out our material. And thank you for all of your effort. Enjoy. We will be in touch. I won't send you your certificates today because I've got way too much work. You will receive them probably next weekend when we will be a little bit more laid back. Very informative. You get a lot of thanks. So enjoy and see you, hopefully, on the 8th of March. Bye-bye, everyone. Enjoy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.